And on here as we get ready for the Eagles and the Ravens on Sunday. And, of course, Ravens not looking so good on Monday night up in Foxborough. And the Eagles have not looked good for a month or two now. Frank Fitzpatrick has been an editor and writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer since 1980. That's Tug McGraw and Mike Schmidt for those of you doing the math on all that. He's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we welcome him back on as a longtime sports scribe and columnist, as well as a Pulitzer Prize finalist back at the turn of the century. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Phila, Phila, Fitz. Frank, what's going on, man? How's the city of brotherly love doing?
Well, there are little signs of daylight peeking through the darkness that we've inhabited for the last several years. I mean, the Flyers look a little better. I think generally people like Carson Wentz. I think they feel like he's the guy to build around. The Sixers look like they're maybe finally at the point where they could become an awful NBA team instead of a dreadful, So there are little signs of encouragement, all across the board.
Well, at every turn for Philadelphia, I always have felt, even when the Phillies won last decade and won back in the early 80s, I was an Eagles season ticket holder back in the Buddy Ryan and the Richie Kotite days, the glory era of Gang Green and Randall Cunningham and all that. It's an Eagles town, right? I mean, and I've been up there for a million Flyers playoff games and all that, and even through Dr. J and Moses. But for the Eagles to get off to the start they got off to, I mean, it's such a mixed bag to talk about this week with this team because some of these guys are left over from previous administrations. Jimmy Schwartz is a Baltimore guy. He's a part of this, so got a little bit of my heart involved in that because I've had a long relationship with him. And then there's the quarterback and the whole off-season shenanigans where they have been as curious a franchise in all of their maneuverings and the way Jeff Lurie's run them after such a long period of stability that may or may not have been appreciated with Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb.
There are a lot of people regretting, I think, having buyer's remorse about Doug Peterson and Andy Reid. I mean, you look at what the job Andy Reid's doing in Kansas City. Now, granted, he's got more talent than Peterson does at this stage, but he's just the guy that knows how to coach football and knows how to get 9-10 wins out of a team every season. Whether or not he'll ever get to the point where he takes a team to the top is another matter. But you're right. This the Eagles franchise, the stability that sort of marked them for so long has just vanished. I mean, it looks like they don't know what they're doing now in terms of their public statements. And Peterson said some bizarre things on the podium last week, and you really wonder where they're coming from.
Well, the losing now, it started to add up, and it's sort of to catch them. And as you go into the offseason here, lots of guys making money, lots of guys, there were commitments made, lots of guys like Deshaun Jackson and Shady McCoy and Kiko Alonso, all these guys that have sort of, flushed through there. It feels like there's going to be more flushing, coming up. And it feels like for a change in that division, there is a boogeyman, right? I mean, the Dallas Cowboys look like no matter what any of these teams do in the offseason, they'll be the favorites next year, and they might have a parade down there in Dallas in 6 weeks.
Absolutely. They did it right. I think they, as much as I dislike the Cowboys, they built the offensive line first, and they went and got a running back, and they got a young quarterback, and although that was something of a surprise, I think, but still, yeah, they did it the right way. And, the Eagles, I just don't know that they have any cogent plan in mind. I mean, it seems like they're investing all this money in Fletcher Cox on the defensive line, and what the team really needs are, and I think everybody recognized this at the beginning of the season, were wide receivers and cornerbacks, and that's been their two weaknesses this year. They've kind of been in every game this year, save for maybe the Bengals game, but their wide receivers are just terrible. They've got no deep threats. Teams are just loading the box. Jordan Matthews is their one half-decent receiver, but he's not a deep threat. And you see the guys that got away, like you mentioned, Deshaun Jackson. What about Jeremy Maclin in Kansas City? He's having another really good season. And you wonder, was there a plan? I mean, was there a process, to borrow a phrase from another lamented franchise in Philadelphia?
Well, if you go back to, the owner's been a constant there, right? And, a likable enough guy and a guy that wants to win, an affable guy, and certainly, look, this time last year, Chip Kelly couldn't figure out how to throw a holiday party for his staff, right? I mean, he didn't have the people skills to throw a Christmas party. I mean, and Lori didn't like that. Now they have a nice guy and a very competent guy, I think, in Jim Schwartz on the defensive side that they're kind of getting behind, and they have a quarterback. But this takes time. This takes patience. Frank, you're in Philadelphia. You've been there forever. They don't have patience in Philadelphia.
There's no patience. There's, as you said, this is an Eagles town, and I think if at the beginning of the season, before the season started, if you had said, well, they'll be 5-7 or 5-8. People would have said that sounds about right, But when they got up to that 3-0 start, just as one of Philadelphia's shortcomings, one of many, is that we jump on that bandwagon so fast, and we want it to continue at a rapid pace.
Well, hold on. When you beat the Steelers 34-3 and you're 3-0, that's not a bandwagon. If you're not excited, then. It's like I said around here. We were 7-5 before the Patriots beat our ass Monday. If you can't get excited about being in first place when you are, I mean, it all feels short-lived when you have it, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, getting excited is one thing, but what about your expectations 3 weeks earlier? I mean,
sure.
They still didn't have any wide receivers. They still didn't have any cornerbacks. They had question marks at linebacker. Their offensive line was banged up a little. So, I mean, I think, we should have looked at that 3-0 start and said, wow, this, and I think we did. We looked at it and said, this kid is really something. And he's come down to earth as the team has come down to earth. But, but like I said, I still think he's the guy. I think he's the quarterback that they're going to build around. I like him. He's got a good arm. He's got a good head. He's got a lot of poise. He takes the sack a little too often, a little too easily. I think I'd like to see him throw the ball away more, but I think he's a guy they can build around.
Well, in getting Carson Wentz, there was all the process that went into that, right? Whether it was Bradford and the coach and who was going to be the quarterback whisperer, and now the head coach is the homecoming with Peterson and all that. But the dealings that went on to bring Carson Wentz in, it was as curious a move as any franchise this side of, let's say the Cleveland Browns bringing in baseball people to run their football department. We've seen some strange stuff, not to mention on your Twitter feed who's about to become our president. But it's been a strange year all the way around. But for the Eagles, part of that is sort of worked out because I haven't spoken to anybody in Philadelphia this week that doesn't believe Carson Wentz can be a 12-win quarterback as the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles at some point in the future.
Yeah, it makes it makes you question I hate to use the word process again, but I mean, 10 days before the season started, he wasn't even going. Wentz wasn't even going to be activated on Sunday. He was going to be a guy standing on the sidelines, and then they trade Bradford, and suddenly he's not just second string quarterback; he's the starter. I think it was the right decision. Would Bradford would their record have been any different under Bradford? I seriously doubt it. But and I'd like to see Wentz getting a little experience, even as he's taking his knocks. But I don't know. There's just this feeling in the city that it's sort of a runaway, a runaway freight train that they're not really sure who they have and what they need and where they're going and what kind of coach Peterson is and whether he's their guy for the long term. There's just a lot of question marks hanging over that franchise.
Frank Fitzpatrick has been a columnist and sports writer in Philadelphia since 1980. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Phila, Phila, Fitz, as well as out at Philly.com. And, you're writing, but not as much as you used to. And you have a wide swath of things that you sort of take a stab at. A little worn out on Phillies and Eagles and Penn State and all that nonsense you did for so many decades?
Yeah. I'm enjoying it. Let's face it. The older you get, the less enamored you are of the fascinating world of sports that drew you into this business in the first place. And and to my boss's credit, they've allowed me to just sort of do these strange little things that I've been that they allow me to just sort of venture off. I sort of do this historical column every Sunday about some historical aspect of the city's history and that's when you find out that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think every city has a history like that. Where there are ups and downs, and it just seems like in Philadelphia the downs are a little deeper, and the ups are a little shorter than they are in other places. But maybe that's just my parochial perspective.
Yeah, we had riots here last year. What can I say, Frank?
Yeah.
But, look, you're at heart, much like me, an old newspaper guy. I celebrated 25 years on radio this week here in Baltimore, and I don't necessarily think – I appreciate that. I don't think of myself necessarily as a radio guy because I cut my teeth at the News American with John Stedman, at the Baltimore Sun, in the sports department, with sports writers, even contemporary guys, John Eisenberg's and the Ken Rosenthals, who cut his teeth across the water over there when Jack Gibbons brought him down here. And from where you are right now, and I try to get myself into this space after writing a couple of books, and with all the Twitter and the Facebook and all the bad parts that come along with all of that and the election and all, at heart, what you're doing is very admirable because it's like you're an old reporter. You're just looking for a story, right? We would always say that back in the 60s and 70s. Hey, I'm just a reporter. I'm just looking for a good story to tell, right? I don't know that a lot of people approach the world in that way anymore or have the ability to say, I'm just looking for a good story to tell.
You're right. I'm blessed. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I could do a beat under the conditions that these guys work in today with the 24/7 pressures, the tweeting and the videos and the Snapchats and all, these guys are working all the time and round the clock, 24/7, 365 days a year. I mean, when I was doing the Phillies beat, when that season ended in October, you were done until December basically. There really wasn't anything of note going on, so I think I think the world has really changed. And sometimes these guys don't have time to go after a sort of offbeat, interesting story. They're too busy chasing down the latest contract or the latest injury report. It's kind of a shame in a way because I think what makes and what's always made newspapers a little special are those stories. Those things you can sort of sink your teeth into and take a look at sort of an oddball aspect of life and sports.
Human interest is what they would call it, right?
And I'm fortunate to be able to, that they'll allow me the time to do those sort of things. And I really appreciate it, and I love it. I mean, it's just what I needed at this stage of my career.
A guy saved my wife's life twice on the bone marrow registry. My wife had leukemia, and she battled. He's German, and he came over about 6 weeks ago, and we took him all around the country and asked him where he wanted to go. And he's a 24-year-old German kid, speaks a couple languages. He was here during the elections, which perplexed him, and he wanted to go to Philadelphia. We went up to Philadelphia for the day, and we're getting in the car. I got an hour and a half drive up, Frank, and I said, look, Philadelphia's a little different. It's a tough place. He said, I know this. This is where they boo Santa Claus. And I'm like, yes, exactly. So we got up there. He got mistreated at Geno's. He got mistreated at Pat's. He got rubbed down at the Liberty Bell and sort of like cavity searched and barked at. And he came to me in the Liberty Bell. He said, I do not like Philadelphia. I want to leave now. And
what's your point?
So we left. And I guess here's my point. My point is it's such a tough town. It's such a mean town. Mm-hmm. It's always had all of that. And look, I worked at the paper when people would send John Stedman or Ken Rosenthal mean mail in these wacky, Clint Eastwood movies, sort of weird envelopes that would arrive. And in the modern era, the social media, which has now elected a president who tweets insults out at 3 o'clock in the morning to anyone that will hear them, I find it fascinating that you're in a town where everybody's always insulted everybody, and you're looking for these human kindness stories, but it's so easy to be mean these days, right? And a place like Philadelphia, it's almost like they take a little bit of pride, not a little bit, a lot of pride in being mean there, quite frankly.
They do. I mean, let's face it. There's an inferiority complex in Philly. I mean, and I think Baltimore suffered this at one point too. I mean, you're close to Washington. You're sort of sandwiched in between Washington and New York, and so you feel a little down. And I think when I tell you what, when I go around the country, the two things people ask me about Philadelphia are inevitably cheesesteaks and crazy fans. and I think that you're right. I think they act out to sort of fulfill those expectations of people. I'm not saying
I have never met bigger jerks than I have at Eagles games. The last two times we've played up there. Now, look, man, I sat in Section 721 during Buddy Ryan and Rich Kotite. You never saw I mean, maybe some Cowboys, but rarely did Redskin fans roll up in there. You never saw St. Louis Cardinals fans, or even when they went to Phoenix or whatever. The Giants, maybe a little bit. And there was trouble there in the 80s, but I never saw brazen. I saw guys saying things to women. You know, when Terrell Owens was the Eagles for 5 minutes for that year, we played in the new building twice. They were two of the worst experiences from a fan standpoint, sitting with my wife in the stands, where the guys just wanted to see whether you would punch him or not. Like, just how far, and not one, not even drunk. I mean, sober. So, you know, that sort of comes with the territory, and I think the meanness of America that's become, from a journalism standpoint, it's really kind of sad. I mean, we can't ignore it. We talk about it, and I know you've been tweeting a lot about the politics and the mean-spiritedness of all of it. You've gotten involved in that realm, and as a columnist, you know, it's very easy to get lashed out onto at this point, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the internet has facilitated this sort of meanness and angriness in the country. You know, I always say that the internet, I call it Shiva, the Hindu god that is both the creator and the destroyer. And I think I look at the internet that way. I mean, it's created so many opportunities, and it's such a great tool and such a great resource in so many ways, and yet it's destroyed so much. I think civility is just one of the victims. I mean, it's so easy under the guise of anonymity to just sit and viciously attack people. I mean, you look at the comment sections after our stories.
It's
I mean,
a toilet bowl,
look
right?
At them anymore. It's just pitiful, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I, as a sports radio guy who stopped taking phone calls famously 28 months ago, and I still get hey, Nasty, you don't take no phone calls. You don't care what people say. No, I don't. I can't sit here and fire the coach and the quarterback every Monday. It's not appealing to me. It wouldn't be appealing to listen to. It wouldn't be appealing to sanction, in my case, owning the radio station. And I think that there's there used to be a point, and I know you've done a lot of talk radio and all that back in the day as well, where it used to be a thoughtful sort of medium, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think 20 years ago, if you had talked about the meanness in sports fans, people would have pointed to sports talk radio. I mean, that because even though it's a far less nasty world than we inhabit now, it seemed at the time that this is where the nastiness lived. And and you look back on that now, and that was tame compared to the stuff that's going on now.
Yeah, they had to hang on hold 15 minutes in order to say something bad about my mother. Then,
Yeah, right.
Now they can just hit the internet and hit the keyboard and get it done. Hey, last thing for you, because I know you've covered so many Olympics, and I know we talked a little bit about this, and I think I had you on before Rio, and I always remember a great guest, Frank Fitzpatrick, so you got called back the second time. That means you passed the audition, but, you've covered 9 Olympics, and the Olympics are now something that I'm sure every time you got on a plane, like my dear friend Phil Jackman, or like anyone else here in Baltimore that was on that beat back in the heyday when papers covered Olympics, and you flew to Seoul, you flew to Montreal or Calgary or wherever it was that you went, and you felt proud of America, proud of being there to report it, interested in the games. Now you see these the money involved, and corruption's not even the right word. Corruption's not theft. I don't know. It's not even corruption. It's greed. It's avarice. It's ugly. And when you peel back the onion of the Olympics, this has been going on since Los Angeles, right? When the great idea of Peter Ueberroth was, we're going to make money on this thing. Let's turn it into an American endeavor and make money. Well, 3 decades later, it's become its own sewer that isn't worthy of any credible city ever wanting to sanction, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, it's probably not worthy of any, legitimate feeling that this is the great feel-good amateur world that that gets so little recognition during the year. Now, I mean, because it's been getting more and more professional for 30, 40 years now, and it's just now there's virtually you can hardly find an athlete in any kind of developed country that's not supported either by the government or by some corporate entities. It's just changed the whole concept of it. It's still not a bad idea to see athletes from different countries competing against each other. But when you look at the Olympic ideal and what it was intended to be, it strayed, tremendously from that path, and that's kind of sad because there was a specialness about it. Those stories of the kid with no money and nothing but a dream and sort of making his way up, like Billy Mills. I don't know if you remember Billy Mills, the runner, 10,000-meter runner, the guy that came off an Indian reservation and shocked the world, won the Olympic gold medal in 1964. I mean, you don't see many stories like that. You can almost handicap these Olympic events the way you can handicap pro sports these days, which is kind of sad.
All right, well, we'll pick up the Eagles here this weekend. We'll see how it goes. You bring the cheesesteaks, I'll bring the crab cakes, and we'll see how we make out. Frank, it's always a pleasure to check in with you, man. I always appreciate the time. We'll be following your journey out at Philly.com as well as out on Twitter at PhilaFitz. I mean, you're way too nice a guy to be from Philadelphia. You know that, right?
Thank you. That's not what my wife says, but I appreciate it.
I'm going to balance things out. I'll get Eskin and all the rest of them on
there
this
you
week.
Go. That'll definitely balance it, yeah.
I love him too, strangely enough. Great having you on, Frank. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Nestor.
You got it. Frank Fitzpatrick, longtime editor and writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can follow him at Philly.com as well as PhilaFitz out on Twitter. We're having some great conversations this week. We're going up to Philadelphia. Eagles are coming down here with Jimmy Schwartz and Carson Wentz, amongst others, and taking on the Ravens on Sunday. The more I can do to avoid talking about Monday night's debacle up in Foxborough, the better. We will have Mike Wallace with us next Tuesday night out at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen. That's almost to Philadelphia, 30 minutes in that direction. We'll see everybody out there. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero in the DKMS. Hope to see you next Tuesday night. Anything you miss here, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It is brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And last but never least, any breaking news this week on injuries. When Dan Duquette pulls off that huge deal that doesn't say Rule 5 in front of it, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Florida Security Boulevard. Dennis Colossus will be here this Thursday and every Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. Nasty at WNST.net. I got one email address. I'm a very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.